I became an actor, I never fantasized about playing James Bond. As a kid, yeah. But that was being James Bond, that was something else.
Welcome to Being James Bond, the longest running James Bond podcast in the world.
The name is Bond. James Bond.
So I guess the dust is starting to settle a little bit, but things are still pretty dusty about this whole Amazon creative takeover. Welcome to Being James Bond. I am your good buddy, head of section. Still struggling with a cold, so I apologize for how I sound, but I wanted to get this. I don't want to wait much longer to put this podcast out. We are still talking about the events happening in 2025. We spoke to Dave Zaritsky. He gave us a good layout of the land for the year ahead with regard to events. We followed that up with a more in-depth conversation with my good buddy Warren, who is head of Cue the Music and has a pretty incredible concert coming up in October. I wanted to keep the ball rolling, and I know that there's other things happening in the coming year that I really wanted to focus on. And who else but Martin Mulder? He is the gold standard. He's the gold standard of Bond travel events. I've had some incredible moments that I really have to owe to Martin and his work. So we're going to talk to him about what's coming up for Martin Mulder and the team of On the Tracks of 007. Which is, by the way, hitting a pretty substantial milestone this year. And I'll let Martin talk to you about that. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to keep this short because I'm still struggling with a cold and I know how I sound. So I apologize. But yeah, see, again, it's still, the world is still in a little bit of upheaval. There's a lot of really strong opinions about the Amazon takeover. And again, I guess we're not really going to sort of come to a consensus until we start to see what comes out of this. Because again, my position at this point is, I'm not making predictions about what's coming. I just feel that something is coming, which is good. And I've seen people sort of kind of a little eye rolling about that sentiment, saying, oh, what, something is better than nothing, even if it's terrible. Listen, we can't have any sort of a James Bond film unless there's somebody who's willing to take the reins. And we have someone now who is willing to take the reins and move forward. So we can start to keep our fingers crossed and hope things are happening. But until someone makes the commitment to start making new Bond films, well, then there's just nothing. And we have a history that is James Bond. And nothing to look forward to. And again, the history doesn't change. If the next thing that comes out for for James Bond, nothing is different because we still have 25 films. We have a history of Bond films to look back on, whether we're getting new material or not. So anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I guess that's sort of where my head is. But again, once things start to happen, we can get a little better grip on what we think what we can look forward to, what we're looking at in the future. Okay, with that said, let's bring in Martin Mulder and talk about what's happening in 2025.
Transmission begins from Moneypenny.
Martin Mulder, the legend himself. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Joe. I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
I am very good, very good. It is great to see you and talk to you. It's been a while.
It's been a while, absolutely.
Yeah. I have you to thank for probably the greatest trip of my entire life. Was the I still look back on it to this day as being like, honestly, the greatest trip, the greatest experience I've ever had was our On Her Majesty's 50th. So once again, thank you, sir.
Man, that was awesome, wasn't it?
Honestly.
And I still hear so many people talk about it. The people who were there, everybody just loved it. And it was an amazing event.
Yeah. And it was honestly, it's to this day, it what amazes me. I mean, the whole thing amazes me, but one of the things that I just kind of have to remind myself is that was at least from my point of view, that trip was flawless. Like there was not one snag on that entire trip. And that was the most ambitious thing I think I've ever experienced.
Oh, it sure was. And there was so much going on behind the scenes. And I made this book about the making of on Her Majesty's 50th anniversary celebration.
Yep.
And there was just so much that I just couldn't put into that. I just couldn't write about.
Yeah.
And you can easily fill another book with it, with all the behind the scenes stuff. But it was just one of those trips where just everything worked out.
Yeah.
From people to weather, from guests to locations, it all just worked. And yeah, it was an awesome trip.
And honestly, I mean, I know how tough it is to just plan one night, hoping you won't have any problems. That was almost 2 solid weeks of, I mean, all the time in Portugal and then all of
Yeah.
the time in Switzerland and all of the events each day. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Well, the what made it easier was that in Portugal we had the hotel who really wanted to help out and really planned an evening full of excitement. And in Switzerland, of course, there was the Piz Gloria people who kind of did their thing, and it was more a matter of tying things together for me and just make sure that everybody was at the right place at the right time.
Yeah,
which is challenging as well. But
very true. I mean, I do know that you had a crew of people that were helping out.
absolutely, yeah. You need that for such a trip. You just need 5 or 6 people who do the herding.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, enough gushing over past trips. I reached out because I know that you do not sit still, my friend. So I know that you have a lot of things lined up for the year ahead. And I feel we're almost into March. I think by the time this comes out, it'll probably be March already, which is sort of amazing. I can't believe where this year is going already. But
fast.
Yeah, you've got some things lined up.
Well, I realized like last year or the year before that, this year, 2025, would be the 30th anniversary of On the Tracks of 007.
Wow.
And that is quite amazing when you think about it. And so I just wanted to do things. And I always start by looking out, thinking to myself, where do I want to go this year or next year? What would be a fun place to be with people? And you obviously you want to avoid going to the places where everybody's going so you always try to find something new. And so for this year, I thought, I would love to go back to Istanbul, for instance. And I know Richard Skillman once did a trip. He took people through Europe, and he started in Istanbul as well. But that was I think it was 10 years ago. And it's one of those places where every location is sort of close by. You can easily navigate through the city by on foot or by bus or by boat, and just visit everything within a 2-3 day window. So it makes sense from an organizational point of view to do something there, and it's just a lovely city. So that was one of the things that was high on my list.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing with Operation Krilenku.
Nice.
And
when is that scheduled for?
That is in May. That's the last week of May, where you have, I think on the 31st, there's this big event in France done by all the James Bond clubs. And that's on the Saturday. And the weekend before, there's an event at the Amberley Museum done by Shaken Not Stirred guys. So I just wanted to tie these things together, and especially with participants flying over from the USA, and they're in Europe anyway. So why not give them like something to do in between? So Operation Krilenko takes place in between those two other events.
That's awesome.
It is. So there's a lot to do for Bond fans.
Yeah, and that's that's pretty rich with locations. I know from Russia with Love, obviously Skyfall.
Yeah, and there's some second unit stuff from The World Is Not Enough.
Right.
So there, and also because Istanbul. Most of the things take place within the old city center, which is like almost like a monument in itself. These things don't change, and that's always fun thing to see. All these old mosques, they still look exactly like they did in 1963. So yeah, people will be in for a treat.
Nice. And that's a great point, because the trick sometimes with location spotting, for James Bond locations, lot of the old ones either don't exist anymore, or
Yeah.
just they're decrepit shells of what they used to be. But you're right, like Istanbul is a timeless city.
It is, and I know from other trips as well. Sometimes you take people on a bus for an hour, and you end up at some place that nobody can even recognize, but you just want to be there, to be complete. And that sometimes feels a bit silly, especially for the spouses who are coming along. They're like, "What are we looking at?" Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. But again, I always say about any sort of Bond travel, I say, it's one thing to be a Bond fan and really get jazzed up because we're seeing the locations that we recognize and we get excited over it. But I think even just people who don't know James Bond, these are some pretty incredible locations. These are some pretty amazing places that we go.
That's the thing with James Bond. He always goes to the best places, the best hotels. You never see him in a shady alley unless you're in Vegas, of course. But no, but I mean that you wouldn't be able to put together a trip like this for the Jason Bourne series, or for Mission Impossible, for instance.
Right.
I mean, these are different types of franchise, and Bond is always the best of the best. So that's why it's so much fun to do these things.
Absolutely. So you said that's the end of May?
That's the end of May. Yep.
Okay. And what's creeping up after that?
And then I wanted to do something with A View to a Kill, even though it's not everybody's favorite, but it's still it's a cool Bond film, and it's Roger Moore, and since the clubs were already doing something in France and Shaken Not Stirred doing something in the UK, I thought, what's the only place that nobody's going to? That is San Francisco.
Right.
And I've never been to San Francisco myself, so that's a great opportunity to go there with a bunch of people. I mean, it's a city full of not even Bond locations alone, but so many movies have been filmed there. Great stuff: Dirty Harry, Escape from Alcatraz, Bullet,
Right.
Steve McQueen's Bullet. So there's just a lot to see. So that should be fun. And because we kind of missed the 50th anniversary celebration of Diamonds Are Forever because of COVID at the time, we had to skip that. And since we're roughly in the area anyway, I'm just combining it with a visit to Vegas. Even though Vegas is tough, because that's one of those cities where like almost everything has disappeared or has completely changed, or so there's not a lot left of the Diamonds Are Forever filming locations. But still, it's a fun place to be at with a group of people, and when you're with like-minded people, it's always fun.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you don't have a bad time in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So it's right. If you're going to go and see where things were, how, that kind of thing, what better place to do it than Vegas?
Sure. Yeah. It's a lot of, I was looking at, making a walking tour through downtown Vegas. And I was like, okay, here's a parking lot where something used to be, and a parking lot where something used to be. It's going to be interesting, for sure.
Nice. Any people that I know going on this trip?
Oh yeah, a lot of people.
Is it? I don't want to spoil any surprises if it's.
No, I mean, yeah. There's a lot of the people who came with me on previous trips. They just sign up because it's it's always a lot of fun. And it's not only about seeing the locations or seeing a special guest or whatever. It's also like almost like a family reunion, a
Yes,
reunion of friends. You just hang out in the coolest places with people who are all Bond fans.
absolutely.
So it's just a lovely thing to do. And
Nice.
then there's another thing but I'm still working on that. In October, I think the official 30th anniversary of On the Tracks of 007 is somewhere in October, and I should have known this, but I can't remember the exact date. But somewhere in October, we it's the official anniversary, and since we're in October in the UK for the Cue the Music show.
Nice.
With the three money pennies, and I know David Zritsky is going to be there. He's doing all sorts of things. So I'm looking into doing something there, and I still haven't figured out what, but I might be doing something for the anniversary there.
Nice. And I have to tell you, I mean, I'm actually stunned that it's been that long since that book came out.
Well, the book came out in 2008, but it all started in 1995.
Right. Okay.
Which is kind of incredible because, and so many especially younger people, they don't realize that. But in 1995, the internet was like as big as your little pinky.
Right. Yeah.
It hardly existed, and I was one of those people who was one of the first to have a computer, who was one of the first to have a website, and I started coding these things myself. I was just having fun with it, and I thought, okay, what can I do? Let's make a page about James Bond. And the only thing that I was interested in at the time was in the locations. So I just started making this list, and it was a website, and it was maybe one page, and it was just a long list of whatever I could find. And that list kind of grew because people found that page, and that is difficult to get around. Google didn't even exist, so how on earth did people find that website? I still haven't figured it out. But people contacted me by email, and they said, I know this location, and that one that you have there is wrong. Or I clearly remember somebody who contacted me who had worked on the HMS Tenby, which is a ship that they use for the fake burial in You Only Live Twice. And he said, that ship, I was working on it when they filmed that, and it was moored there and there. And so you get all this information from all these sources, and that was just fabulous. And that list grew and grew. And that eventually led to the publication of that book. But it's 30 years ago. It was a totally different times.
Yeah, and it really is between the early days of the website, the publication of the book, which again, for anybody who does not have this book, it is the gold standard of Bond location books. You've also published several other books along with, which is also pretty amazing. Several of them I have right behind me on my shelf. But it's also blossomed into these trips. So you've really grown this thing into.
One thing leads to another, and it's just great to even today, every now and then I receive emails from people who say, oh man, that book helped me out so much because I went to Venice with my wife, and my wife was like, oh, we're really going to do this, but I have all these locations mapped out by you, and it saved me so much precious time. And it's always lovely to hear.
Yeah. It is so true. Honestly, I feel like the trips that I've taken. I mean, honestly, this book has gone with me. I tell people all the time. I said I have two copies of this book. One that I have one that is a nice pristine copy that is actually signed, and I actually won this on a Skillman trip. I think I won it. Might have came in like second or third at the poker tournament, something like that. But the other copy I have is the one that goes with me on all the trips. So it's all beat to hell and dog-eared and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's a
well
really incredible
used.
piece of work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and these later books just came about because some, with the first book you just have to push everything into one book, so the chapters couldn't be that long, and you had to sort of skip certain locations, and also, new information came out years after. So the later books just focused on a certain destination, like a book about Japan or a book about
Mhm.
Thailand, and you can really go into the details there, and also include maps, for instance, because in the original On the Tracks book, I just, I couldn't figure out how to do that, how to create maps at the time without having to pay for it. So you learn, and the techniques get better and better, and it's it keeps getting easier to do these things
Yeah.
yourself. So that's pretty cool, because we did try, at the time we did try to get an official publisher to publish these books, but they all said, like, we can't quite figure out where to put this on a shelf. Is it a book about movies, or is it a book about travel? It's
Yeah.
they couldn't figure it out. So that made
Yeah.
it tough. And then I found out how to like self-publish things, and that really helped.
Yeah. And yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've been down the same route.
Yeah. You've been there.
Yeah. What was the first trip you did?
I think the first trip to a James Bond location was a trip to Jamaica, and it was with my then girlfriend. Was the first trip that I ever did without my parents. So it was like completely new to that whole thing, and that
Mm.
was a funny trip because that was also somewhere in the 90s. And I remember I booked an apartment by myself without going to like a travel agent, and I I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, how did I do that? Because with the internet hardly existing, how did I book that? And I remember I found an advertisement by a lady who lived in New York, and she owned an apartment in Jamaica, and she offered it for rent. And I called her, I think, because it had a telephone number with it. And I called her and I said, "Can I book your apartment?" And she said, "Yeah, fine." And that was it. And then I went on a trip to Jamaica, and I had no confirmation whatsoever. And when I got to the address, it turned out to be like a whole complex of apartments. And I found a reception an area, and I went in there and I said, "Hi, I booked an apartment." And the lady behind the counter said, "Whose apartment?" And I said, "I don't know." I have no idea. It was a lady from New York. And she was looking at me like, "You got to be kidding." But in the end, we figured out, we found the telephone number again, and I called the lady again, and I said, "Hey, I'm here in Jamaica for your apartment." And somehow it worked. It worked out, and it was still available, and we got in. And it's a crazy story.
Oh, that's funny.
It's weird how that works
Right.
when you think back about it.
That could have gone wrong real quick.
Absolutely.
What was the first official like organized trip that you did where you brought people to
Oh,
locations?
that was a trip to Portugal, actually.
Okay.
That was just a small group of people, maybe eight people, and I just rented a minibus myself, and I drove to the locations myself. And it was interesting because I had absolutely no experience with these things, and there was this one guy on the trip, and he knew so much about Honor Majesty, because obviously we were going to the Honor Majesty Secret Service locations.
Mhm.
One guy who knew so much about it, and that's always kind of intimidating when somebody seems to know more about it than you do.
Right.
Later it turned out the guy was Charles Helfenstein, the guy who wrote the book about who would later write the book about the making of Honor Majesty's Secret Service. He was like the expert on the movie, and one
Oh
of the
wow.
collectors as well. I think he owns Tracy's wedding dress as well.
Really?
Yeah. He's a fun guy. But I only figured that out like during the trip who he was.
Oh wow.
But it
Is
was that
he?
was cool.
Wow, that's cool. Do I know his name, by the way?
Charles Helfenstein.
Okay.
I don't. He's not on social media or anything, but
Never wrote a book on it or anything.
he wrote the book The Making of On Her Majesty's Secret Service,
Okay.
and which is a fantastic book. And he also wrote a book about the making of Living Daylights, I think.
Okay. All right. So it is. Yeah, I know who you're talking about now.
Yeah, he's a fun guy,
Nice.
and a lot of knowledge on the subject.
Oh, very cool.
But
Excellent.
that was the first thing that I ever, and I think it was 2004 or something, even before the whole book came out. So, but that was just a small trip, and then I for a long time I didn't organize any trips because you have to kind of you have to like create a community to you have to know people, people have to trust you, people have to realize that what you're doing is fun, and they want to come with you to those trips. So I think the first big one was the Japan trip, the 2017
Right.
Japan trip. That was awesome.
I hear stories. Yeah.
Well, that's just a lovely country to travel through.
Yeah.
And also, they take things seriously, and they, if you order a bus, for instance, and you want it at 9 in the morning, the bus will arrive at 8:45, and you will have somebody walking around in the hotel lobby at 8:45 looking for you because your bus is there. And that is very that's a great, an easy way to for an organization, for someone who organizes the trip. It's just amazing, because I can also remember being in the Bahamas, for instance, where I ordered a bus to be there at 9 in the morning, and it was at some point it was, I think, 9:30, and the bus still hadn't arrived. So I started calling, where's the bus? And they said, yeah, it's on their way. It's on its way. And at 9:45, a bus appears and it parks somewhere on the side. So I decide to walk over there myself. And I said to the bus driver, are you my bus? And we have a whole group standing here waiting for you. And he said, yeah, well, I have to finish my breakfast first. And when I'm done, I first have to drive back to the company because I think I have a problem with my clutch. And I was like, really?
Wow.
I had this whole schedule, at 9 o'clock we would depart, at 10 o'clock we needed to be at some location, you have it all planned out. And in the Bahamas, you just don't work with schedules.
Yeah. I get it's a whole different laid back attitude, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you just have to just turn the switch and have to go along with them and adapt to them, because otherwise it'll drive you crazy. But Japan is much easier in that respect.
Right. That's cool. So yeah, is that you sound like you have a pretty full agenda for this year.
Absolutely.
Do you get tired? Do you ever kind of feel like, boy, this is too much, or do you still sort of just eat it up?
No, yeah, it's all doable. It gets complicated when you start emailing people or like hotels, and you don't get immediate answers, and after like a week or two you kind of forget that you emailed them in the first place, and that sometimes gets a bit tricky, especially when you're doing 2 trips at the same time, or more or less you're organizing it at the same time. But no, in general, you don't get tired of it. It just you just see things grow, and sometimes you come up with great ideas, and you'll just try to make it all work in that trip.
Yeah,
always a fun challenge.
Yeah, and I kind of getting back to what you're saying earlier. I mean, it's also good that you have a good crew that can kind of roll with the go with the flow, kind of.
Yeah, that depends on the type of thing that you're doing. I mean, for something like Japan or Thailand, that was just more or less a trip from A to B, and you don't really need a crew, because as long as you have everything arranged, you can just take people and guide them from A to B. But for something like On Her Majesties, where so many things are happening at the same time, you really have. And also, when there's VIP guests involved, I can only be at one place at the same time. So you can't like guide people from A to B and be there for a VIP guest. So you need different people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get that. Martin, will you please keep us posted and let us especially as October starts to approach?
Yeah, well, yeah. On the tracks of 007.com is where you can find the latest information, and you can subscribe to the newsletter there, which is, and that's important to know, it's not a newsletter that is being sent every day or every week, but only when there's news. So when you subscribe to that newsletter, you always get to know, you get to hear the news first.
Nice. And people should definitely check out your book, and they should definitely check out the other books that you like. Again, you're kind of building quite a library at this point.
Absolutely. I think we're already at 10 books or something. Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
It is. And we're working on a new book, actually. And that's a book about Jamaica. And that is
there you go.
And that's supposed to come out in June.
Awesome.
Written by Simon Firth, and it's we're working on it at the moment, laying the last hand on it, and it's going to be a great book.
Excellent. That's great. Martin, thank you so much for this. Again, thanks for taking the time out. And seriously, honestly, keep us posted, and
I hope to catch up with you someday somewhere.
Well, I'm headed I am headed to London in October, so I will definitely be seeing you.
There.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that's why. So definitely keep me posted. Let me know what's brewing.
Absolutely, we'll do.